Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Heil, and I'd like to welcome you to Protected Tomorrows. Our webinar today is titled Overview of an 8-Step Special Needs Planning Process. I'd like to now introduce the president and founder of Protected Tomorrows, Mary Ann Ellert.
Hello, everyone. I am happy to be here, and we're going to have some fun this week. I know that we're going to be covering several classes, and this is the start. So whenever you're listening to this, it'll be recorded, so it'll be kind of fun for you as well. So this class is going to be covering the things you need to be thinking about so that you have an overview of what we're going to be talking about in the classes. And then the other classes are going to be covering government benefits and what they're all about. So it'll be in detail. Today's an overview. So we'll get more into the details of government benefits in class number 2. Class number 3, we're going to talk about some of the legal things you need to be thinking about: special needs trusts, the different kinds of trusts, guardianship. So a lot of the legal kind of things and explaining some of the legal jargon you might be hearing. Then we're going to cover the ABLE Act, which is pretty new in a lot of our worlds, and we'll be covering the details of the pros and cons of the ABLE. And then we're going to cover retirement and how does retirement for you look relative to the rest of your world, because the average couple might have to plan for 2, but we have to plan as family members, not only retirement for ourselves, but retiring for someone else with us and funding that. And then finally, since these are all recorded, you're going to get the opportunity to do a live Q&A with me on Saturday, August 7th, and I'll go through the details on that at the end of this session. So let's get started and go through some of the things that you should be thinking about. I'm going to touch on some areas that you can be thinking about and make some notes about so that when you're coming to the next classes, you'll be able to hear it in detail and write your questions for Saturday. So I don't know if that many of you know me and know my story, but my story is all about my sister. So Marcia was 4 years younger than me. She had cerebral palsy, and she's why I do what I do. She taught me what's important. She taught me how my parents thought, because some of her comments about what she knew they were thinking and not thinking. She lived a full life because my parents made sure that happened. She was happy. She was as independent as she could possibly be. And she also taught me that she wanted a full life. She wanted those things because she saw there were 6 children. So she was one of 5 and she had a twin. So she's us all growing and moving away. And those were all things that she wanted as well. So you'll hear me talk a lot about the planning that we do and how I thought about it as a sister. Later on in my life, I now have a son with special needs, and I look at it from a whole different view, right? Because I was trying to protect my sister and give her this full life at the same time, where my son is much more focused on protection, even though I do want him to have a full life. As parents, we want to protect, and as a sibling, we might want to push a little bit. And I think that's what I did for my parents. But I started out by having a financial background and wanting to apply that into the world of special needs. And people thought I was a little strange for wanting to do this, thinking there would be no business and no people who really needed our help. But we have found over the years that there's a lot of people who want some direction. And that's how these training programs came about, because we want to be able to help anyone who wants to do some planning to have some tools for themselves. So my sister was pivotal in every way I thought. I always thought about when I was doing things and helping my parents plan for her, was this going to make her life better? And that was always the benchmark that I used. I did lose my sister she was just turning 40. She lived in a residential facility and loved it. My parents had a hard time helping her make that move when she was 34. But at the age of 40, she had a seizure in her sleep, couldn't turn over, and suffocated. It was a very, very hard time, all of us, as you can imagine. But I continued to talk to my parents about what their dreams were for my sister. And so I live through that and hope that I can help other families do the planning that you need to do so that your child has a safe and happy life as well. Okay. So my mission is your mission, is to make sure your child is safe, happy, and is able to do as much as they possibly can do, no matter what their disability, and so that you can put the plans in place so that you too can have a full life. But the other thing I learned through this, and I've been doing this now this is our 31st year, and so I've learned a lot about what's necessary and what's hard about it. And the one thing I know is that our lives, and I live your life too, planning for my son, it's difficult, right? There's regular life is difficult. I mean, but it's also joyful. And we all want that. We live through those journeys. But the thing that I know is that we also worry about special education. We worry about medicines. We worry about doctors. We worry about the future. We worry about yesterday. And then you put on top of it somebody like me telling you, well, you ought to be planning and you ought to be doing special legal work and you ought to be understanding government benefits and coming to you with so many of these different things that you should do. And it feels impossible, right? And I know that when I look to the future, I keep seeing the horizon out in the future. And it's so hard to think about, I'm never getting there. I'm working at this. I'm getting closer. I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. I'm a yet person. Somebody said to me, you're always talking about what yet you have to do. And I do. I think that way. And so that same person taught me, turn around and look at where you've come. Look at what you've accomplished. So you never get to the horizon when you go after it, but you're always getting closer. You just don't see it because you have to turn around and see what you've done. So that's how this 8-step process came about. I recognize that there's so much on our plate. It's hard to start sometimes. So we start with step 1, and we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk very briefly about these steps today. And then in the next classes, we'll be talking about the details. Okay, is that fair? All right. So I'll tell you a little bit more about Protected Tomorrows. It came about because when I started my financial firm, I said I wanted to focus on the families who have special needs in their families. And so we do regular financial planning and money management, but this piece is the piece that's very special to me. And we've come out of doing that by knowing that we wanted to help every family, not just families who needed to hire us for those financial things, but we wanted to help every family get resources. So our charity came about so that we could do some of that. And the other purpose of our charity is to help incubate other charities. And there are a few that we have done. And my favorite one is Tails for Life. Those of you who know me see pictures of me with dogs a lot. It's because if I probably had a second life, I would come back as a dog or a veterinarian. But it was a long story about how it got started, but there was a group that was trying to help a young lady who had a disability create funds for a service dog. So I got involved in that, and we got the funding. And it was from Charlie Sheen, the actor, actually, who had a relative in the town where I was working. And he helped fund this dog that we needed for this young lady. And we created this separate not-for-profit eventually called Tails for Life, where we raise funds and selectively people are picked through grants to have a dog trained for their child, and the dog is specifically chosen and trained for that child. So it's been a really successful charity. We have helped many, many families, and that is my fun stuff. And I'll show you a picture of Augie. He is one of the dogs that has been trained for my son. Unfortunately, my son hasn't been able to quite integrate into that through some other issues he has, but Augie is a delight. He is a seeing eye dog as well as a anxiety dog. So he's very fun, and we're keeping him trained so that if my son is ready, he will go with him. I also have 2 other dogs that are trained therapy pups, and I'm always covered with white hair because they're fun. So now you know a little bit about me while I teach. Okay, so my goal today is to help you take action. And each class, I'm going to give you that challenge to take action. So if you sit through other classes, my challenge to you is listen carefully. Don't try to do everything. Pick one thing. Pick the one thing out of each class you sit in on that is the most important for you, okay? And I'm going to ask you at the end to commit to that. So let's talk about, I said, remember I had goals, and I measure everything against that goal for my son. And I started doing that with my sister when she was younger. So the story about my sister is she was diagnosed with when she was 2. I was 6, and my parents came home, and we didn't really understand what cerebral palsy was all about at the time. But we did know that there were 6 children in the family. I had 2 older brothers, 3 younger sisters. I was the oldest girl. And being the oldest girl, if any of you are the oldest girl in the family, know you're the second mom in the household a lot. And so my parents sat me down and explained my sister's diagnosis as much as they understood it, and told me I was going to have a job when I grew up, that I was going to be the one who's going to be there for her and help her and make sure she was all right for the rest of her life. I was 6. And I thought that was the coolest thing on the planet, because I was one of those kids who was helping mom and wanting to, bake and wanting to do all the things for her, help her. It's just how I grew up. And so that served me well. And as I got older, though, I wanted to make sure I learned that I wasn't going to be a protector, not just her sister, but I didn't want to be a protector. So I fought that battle. So if you have other children, know that that's part of being a sibling, that we want to help. We want our sibling to have the best life possible. We want them to have fun with us. But as we get older, so I can remember I was only about 12 when I had that first experience where I was at the store with my sister and she could walk a little bit. She was losing her capacity of movement as she got older. But at that point, she'd be holding onto her grocery cart. And we'd be walking through the store and somebody'd be staring at her. And I would turn around and, what are you staring at? Give them the 1-2 punch of don't stare. She's just like you and me. They ran off because they were embarrassed that they were caught. That happens. And my sister turned around and said, "You tell them, Mayor." And I realized, wow, she's counting on me to speak for her in some cases. She was verbal and she pretty much had her say, but she really wanted me to stand up for her. And so I did it, and I continued to do it through her lifetime. I also wanted her to have fun. So I did some stuff, took her to concerts with me. When she was 21, I was the one who gave her enough alcohol to be a little tipsy and have a hangover and all those things that we do as siblings, right? I was always challenging that. I will tell you that the time that she passed away, it took me, it was a Saturday morning when I got the call, and my parents were devastated. I was devastated. My siblings were, and I still struggle with it. I still struggle with where would she be if she was around, but I used that. So someone taught me to use that. And this is what came out of that. That as I think about her and I think about her life and I think about what I wanted, I think about what's the best thing that could have happened for her and what was my biggest fear. And I now translate that to my son's life. So what do I want for my son? What's the best thing that could happen? And what's my biggest fear? Well, my biggest fear is I'm not going to be here. And some of those things that I can maybe help him with, I can't help him with in the future, and I can't keep him safe, right? So every move I made when I helped my parents with my sister, I was always thinking, is this thing we're doing right now going to make her have the best life possible? And to my parents, when I asked them that question, what they wanted was for my sister to be happy and safe. That was their measuring stick. So I'm going to ask you the question, what's your measuring stick for your child's happiness or your child's best thing that could happen? So my parents said they wanted her to be happy. My job was to figure out what happy means, right? Because happy to my sister and happy to my son is different than happy for your child. And so my first question is, what can make your child? What's the best thing that can happen for their future that you can control? Because there are things we can't control, right? So the things that we can make happen, what are they? And then secondly, what's your biggest fear for your child? Take a minute, write that down, because that's going to drive the rest of this class, and it's going to drive the next 4 classes as well. What's the best thing that can happen? And what's your biggest fear? Now, I know I do this a lot, and before the pandemic, we were face to face, right? But I still get a lot of feedback from people because I tell people at the end, email me at what you're thinking. Hey, tell me what you want, because I like to hear it. And the majority of the answers come back that people want their child happy, independent as possible, and safe. Kind of the same thing my parent wanted. And I want that for my son, but I want it for all my children. It's just that for my other children, I can encourage them. I can't do it for them. For my other son, I might have to do it. But I will challenge you, because this process is not about necessarily just thinking about what you want, but it's making it happen. So if people ask you, what have I done for them? It's making them do it. That's what I'm hoping to do here, is making you come up with the things you're going to do and start the process, All right. That's what this class is about. If you say happy, let me just give you my thoughts on happy, because happy is different for all of us. Our job, we're here, and we someday may not be here with our child. Our job is to put in place the nitty-gritty details of what it is you want. And it's not just saying the words, it's doing the work. So let's get started on the work. Work step number 2 is create the plan, create the map. Okay. If you're going to go somewhere, I used to be able to say this 30 years ago, you can't just get in the car and drive. And I still don't. I still look at not a map, but I go on my phone and I say, well, how far is it? You got to know how far it is. You got to know things like, what direction am I going to start out in? I have to know, am I going to try to take the highway or the back roads? I have to know how long it's going to take so I know when to leave. Now, in the old days, we would take the map and we figured out. Now we go to our phone or we go to our GPS system and we do it. But you still, I don't think, get in the car if you're going on a long journey. You want to know where the hotels might be you're going to stay. You want to know some things. Okay. Is that fair? So if we're going to do that, we got to create a map of something. And so that consists of a couple of things. The first map, and people go, why do you have to do this? You have to take care of yourself. Because if you are the driver or you're the coach, you're the leader of this team, then you have to take care of you. You have to be here. You have to be healthy. You have to be financially secure. And this is not a financial planning class for you, but there's a lot of components of financial planning in the process. So number 1, you have to have a plan for yourself to make sure that you have enough to live while you're working. You have enough when you retire, not just for 2, but for 3 or 4, depending on how many children you have that you might have to fund into the future. Your retirement's going to go beyond you. It's going to go into the future when you're not around. You have to know what's going to, if something happens to either one of you, if you're a couple, what happens to the other one? And then when you're both gone, how does the money pass? Basic financial planning. Then we can think about this. Then we can say, what does the plan for your child look like? And how much is it going to take? Now, you can do this. When I started this, I used to just say, well, it's a big stack of money. I don't say that anymore. I said, we can figure it out. We can figure out what to do. Because since I don't know the future, I don't know my future, right? I don't know what my retirement looks like. I don't know if I'll be traveling. I don't know how long I'll be healthy. I don't know all those things, but I'm going to assume the best, and I'm going to plan for the best, and I'm going to also plan for the things that could happen. I have to do that for my child. I can't predict if his residential opportunity will continue to work. I can't predict. He keeps saying, well, he's blind now, that he'll be able to see and drive and all the things he thinks might happen. I don't know what science will do for him, but I know what we exist now, and I know what I want for the future. So we'll put a plan in place, and we are going to do that in one of our processes when we talk about benefits, because benefits provide the ticket to some of those things we need. So we're going to talk about, what is your child's life going to look like? What are the medical needs, recreation, education? What does that look like for your child? And then how do we quantify it? Because if I can do both of those things, it's kind of like if I had a child who was just born and somebody said, how much did you put away for college? Well, what do you want? You want him to go to Harvard? You want him to go to junior college? You want to go to a trade school? That tells me how much I have to save. This is the same process. We're going to say, what does the life of your child look like based on what you know today? And this is not a one-time thing. This is something you look at on a regular basis. Say, okay, I know more. They're 2. I know more. They're 22. I know now they're 32. It's changed constantly for all of our children, but especially our child who has special needs. What does it look like? Then we're going to look at benefits. We're going to have a special program just on benefits in this session to talk about, what are they? What's SSI? What's SSDI? What's DAC? What does Medicaid do for us? What is Medicare? What are the dangers? What are the limitations? We're going to go through all of that in one of the classes. That's a class all by itself. We always get a lot of questions about this. If you have specific questions, come to the class with the class questions. I'm not going to do Q&A here, of course, because we're recorded, but come to the class, listen to see if I answer them, and the ones I didn't answer, circle them and come to the live Q&A session on Saturday. Okay. How are you going to do all this? How are you going to prepare for your child's number crunching when you do the plan. And then I'm going to tell you when we're doing benefits is to limit what your child has. So how can we plan a best life for them? If they can't have money and the government might not pay it all, how do we do it? Well, we're going to talk about the legal things in another class. We're going to talk about why you can't leave money to your child directly. And that'll become very clear. And maybe it's not, I got started because I said to my parents, how'd you plan for Marcia? And I'll tell you, they didn't want to talk about it. Why? Okay, this is 30 years ago. Why did they not want to talk about what they did for my sister? Because they couldn't think about it. They couldn't think about her without them. Okay, I understand that very well now, but I didn't understand it then. So one, they didn't want to talk about it. Two, I don't think they really understood what they did. And three, when I looked at what they did, my dad said, okay, let's look at what we did. They had a will, they disinherited my sister, they left my sister's share to me, hoping that I would take care of her. Hoping, because it wasn't legal, right? It was hoping. So let's say we know that we shouldn't leave money directly to our child, and that's going to become very apparent in the benefit class. Should we leave it to the siblings and hope they'll do it? Keep our fingers crossed. Stuff happens, right? People get in trouble with credit card debt. They marry the wrong person. They get sued, whatever, things happen. So if we put our money in somebody else's name, we're putting it at risk. Even though I loved my sister, they knew I would take care of her. They knew I was the financial one in the family, so they gave it to me. This isn't the right answer. We're going to talk about that in the legal class, okay? Those other kinds of trusts you may hear about. We're going to talk about why not those trusts and why a special needs trust. So if you have one, still listen in, because we're going to talk about what should be changed recently with the new ABLE Act and how does your trust have to be different. We'll talk about how the trust might need some new language in it, because in 2020, there was an act that passed called the Secure Act, and it made how retirement money is passed to our different children. If you have estate planning documents, you probably want to listen to this legal session carefully, because the laws have changed having to do with retirement money. So listen to that in the class we're going to do on legal, and it may impact how you decide split your assets to your child. So that's my role, right? My role is to teach you, and then have enough sessions like this and pay attention when these sessions come up, because things change. I spent 2 days last week listening to the person who's really in my industry, in the financial industry, the person who knows more about how the IRS looks at all the retirement plans that we have, and what are the nitty-gritty details, and what has gone wrong, and what has changed recently that we all have to pay attention to. Okay, so we're going to talk about that, and that there's two trusts. There's a trust for money we leave, and there's a trust for mistake money, and there's a special trust for if you're paying child support to a special needs child. We're going to talk about that. So I'm giving you an overview. You're saying, oh, but I want to know more about that. This is an introduction. And if I start to go that, we're going to be here for a very long time. Okay. We're going to try to make it fun. I tend to tell stories in my class, but I wanted to give you a good overview of what we're going to cover. And there's two trusts, special needs trusts. There's one for the money you leave, and there's money for other people. That's one trust. And then there's money that might get to your child by mistake. I see more and more of those happening. And people say, well, nobody's going to leave my child anything. And then they call me 2 years later, oh, grandma left my child something. Or my child won the lotto, bought a lotto ticket. They were really lucky. Or I didn't think I was getting divorced, and now I am. And I have this child. And if I get child support and my child turns over 18, I heard it's going to hurt them for their benefits. Yeah, that's all true. So how do we use these trusts to our advantage? Okay. And when we're talking about legal, we're talking about a lot of things in these classes, and some of them are easy. And so when I talk about creating a trust and putting people in charge of money, relatively, it's not so hard, because you can usually pick people in the family who could do it, or you can piggyback with a corporate trustee who will help them. Okay, and we'll talk about that in the legal class. Now I'm talking about giving the real job away. Okay, who is going to be here when you're not, when you're incompetent, when you die? Who's going to make the medical decisions and the government benefit decisions? And it's hard. I'm not going to pretend like it's an easy decision to make. You don't just name one person, you name backups. And if you have people who get the job later, they need to have backups. You got to teach the family what has to happen if something happens to you. A week ago, we did a class on talking with siblings. I interviewed 8 siblings who are either going to be guardians or were guardians. And we talked about their responsibilities. But I'll tell you, we also talked about their rewards, what they learned, and we talked about what kind of things they wish they knew. So you're picking people, and a lot of times it's siblings and sometimes it's not. But these people are going to be stepping up into your shoes, making all these kinds of decisions. So we're going to be talking about that in the legal session. And we're going to talk about one more thing. What happens when your child turns 18? They're still your child, but you're not legally in charge anymore. So a guardian, we're going to talk about guardianship. That could have been a whole session all by itself, but I'm going to try to fit all the legal stuff in one because we have so many things to cover this week. Okay. But when does guardianship apply? What are some of the questions about guardianship that happen? Okay. The last question we're going to talk a little bit about in legal is the attorney is going to ask you some questions. So let's say you have 3 children, 1 with special needs, 2 without. What's fair? How do you take care of that child with special needs? Who needs more financially, perhaps? And how do you make those decisions? Now, I have people come to me and say, well, my child with special needs isn't going to have, the attorney said they need the least because they're going to get government benefits. Once you understand what government pays for and doesn't pay for, then you can evaluate it based on what your child's going to need and figure out, I'm going to have, when I pass away, I'm going to have X amount. And we can kind of predict that a little bit in your retirement planning. And then how do I split it? If I'm going to split it, should I do 1/3, 1/3, 1/3? Is that going to be enough? What if you get sick, right? And you have to use some of it. Should I do 50, 25, 25? Should I, what's the split? So in one of those early steps, we talked about calculating what your child needs. And here we're talking about telling the attorney what your child needs. And do you have it? In my instance, I have 3 children, right? They're all stepchildren, but I raised them pretty much. And I want to make sure they're okay. But 2 of them don't need quite as much as the 3rd, Mark. He needs more because he's not going to work, right? And so I have to kind of figure out based on what I need. But then my kids had a rough beginning, okay, in their years with the biomom. So I don't want them to have a hard time if I'm gone, right? So how do I do this? Money is love, right? That's the biggest thing. People fight over vases and little stuff when some parents die. And that's not about the stuff. That's about the love. And so how are we going to do this? How are we going to split the assets so that everybody feels loved, but everybody is cared for who needs it? So my solution was, I'm splitting my assets 3 ways. I'm hoping it's going to be enough, but I'm going to insure my life for some extra money that will fund the special needs trust. So if all my money is used up for me, I will try to make sure that whatever's left is split equally, but that Mark's trust is funded appropriately for what he might need. Okay. There's no right answer here. If you have $1 billion, splitting it equally is okay. If you have limited money, you got to be thinking about it. All right. We're going to talk another class just on the ABLE Act. There's always so many questions. So we're going to have one separate session on the ABLE. It'll be 2nd, 3rd, 4th class. And we'll be talking about what is it? What's the federal law? How do states differ? How do you compare your program in your state to another state? Which one should you use? Which one can't you use? We'll talk about ABLE and the pros and the cons. What are the downsides of using the ABLE? And then we're going to talk about this throughout the class, but I'm going to cover this a little bit more now, just so you have a gist of the things that you could be thinking about while we are waiting for the next day of class, right? I'm hoping you're all going to attend all of them. So let's say that you do all the things I say. Let's say you create the plan and you understand the benefits and you make sure you're responsible to make sure that all those benefit things are working, and you get your legal step done and you get the ABLE account open for your child. You do all this stuff, right? And you name people to be future guardians. You got it. You got it, right? You saw the attorney, you feel like everything's in place. And then you die or you get sick. Either one, somebody's got to step into your shoes. What do they know? Are they experts? Are they financial people? Do they know your child? Now, I was involved in my sister's life for her 39 and a half years. And then she passed away. And then I spent time talking to my mom because my mom was really depressed. And I kept wanting to talk to her and she didn't want to. And I asked her to write. And then later on in life, not that long ago later, my mom needed care herself. And I brought some of her things to my home so I could help. And one of her dressers was full of letters. And they were letters to me answering all the questions I had. By this time, she had Alzheimer's or she had dementia. And she couldn't really communicate to me anymore. But yet she was telling me in these letters about my sister. Now, I was really involved in my sister's life. I mean, I was on the board of where she lived. I was involved. I got involved in Special Olympics because of her. So how could I not know some of these things that my mom was writing to me about? My dad was hesitant to tell me to anything except for the tactical things. But my mother started telling me things that mattered. So let's talk a little bit about I heard this from the siblings too, let me tell you. The siblings in our class last week, besides telling us what was a good thing about being a sibling and a future guardian and what was difficult and what they wish they knew, this is the wish they knew stuff. Okay. If you can do it in a meeting, in a family meeting, that's great. Or if you can have conversations, but it's also good to write it down because they're not going to remember all the nuances. So what do they need to know? And so I encourage you to say, think back and just close your eyes and do a little meditation to say, when my child was born, what did I know? Not probably not a lot. All right. We learn by coming to these conferences. We learn by talking to the doctors. We learn by talking to other parents. We learn nowadays by reading the web and by going to podcasts and webinars. We learn. But the other future guardians probably haven't done that. They only know what they've lived because they don't come to the classes unless we're encouraging you to have them participate in classes, but they don't know. So what do they need to know? Well, if your child's living residentially, they need to know that. If they're living at home and you expect them to move into your home or to move into the child to move into their home, what are they supposed to know? Right? What do you want for what do you want for their sibling? If they're young and something happens to you and the person who's going to be the guardian has to step in, do they even know what an IEP is? I ask young parents, they don't know. So if the parents don't know what their rights are, how would somebody who really hasn't been the parent who's going to step in and take this role know? I would encourage you to get other family members, especially if they're older and they're in high school, have the other kids get involved in what that's all about. Okay. Or if you're picking your sibling. So if I was picking my sibling to step up to be a future guardian for my son, I might say, would you like to come to the IEP meeting with me? Right. Just to get involved. And they may say no. Well, maybe they are busy. Maybe they're the wrong person. But most of them will say, yeah, it's the parent teacher meeting. Not quite, a little different, but have them go to that. If your child's older and can work, and work may be volunteering, work may be going to a day program. What is it they do with their time once they're out of school? And what do these people who might be the future guardians know? Medical care. So not just who the doctors are today, not just what the meds are today. What's the history? What doctors have you seen that have really worked with you? What doctors do you never want these people to go to again because they didn't work well for your child? Who's the dentist that works? What are the dentists that you need to take who need to take Medicaid? What medicines really threw your child off? God, not what's working now, because you don't know in the future what these people are going to face. They need a history. Okay. Social life is a really important one, especially if your child's not verbal, right? So what makes them happy? We talked about happy in the beginning. So everybody's got their different thing. What do they participate in? What are their friends? What makes them smile? What makes them tick? Okay. Who's going to know that? You do. Then there's this one other thing. We make our children safe, right? We create around them these processes at work, or we learn through the process what's difficult and what keeps them safe. So I'll just tell you a funny story. Some of you might have heard this, but so my son um, is blind, and he also has serious OCD. And after the accident, and he came home, he was in the hospital for a long time. When he came home, he had to learn to live differently, and he had to learn Braille, and he had to learn to get around the house, and he had to learn things. But his OCD made him think that everything a spoon needed to be washed for 15 minutes. And he'd go, Mom, water wasn't running very long, and this got exaggerated even further the older he gets. So he would be taking a shower, and he finally got better about being home at the house alone until he found his own place. But he was at my home, and I would go to work in the morning when I started going back to work, and he would be in the shower, and I'd say, Mark, have a good day. Yeah, okay, Mom. And I'd come home from work, and he'd be still in the shower. I thought, well, maybe he knew where the workout equipment in the house was. Maybe he started to learn to use that. Great. Well, it happened a lot. Sometimes in the middle of the night, I'd hear the water running. So my water bill was like $75 a quarter. It wasn't very expensive water in the community that I lived in. And I was single at the time. And it was just me and Mark. The other two boys had already moved out. And so how much water could I be using? And so after he was there for a while, I got the quarter bill, and it was over $3,000. It's like, okay, I called the city, and I think there's a leak in the yard. So they came out and checked it. No leak. Well, I realized, Mark, what do you do when I'm at work? I shower. Oh, okay. So I had to find a solution. I went on the web, found this little device. It's like $11. If you put it in the shower, and then it turns the water off after so much time. And so you have to wait for it to start up again. It works. Now, if my son was going to live with somebody else, or the first thing he goes to live at his new place, that $11 item is required on his shower wherever he lives, right? It's a really little thing. And it took a lot of research to figure out how to make that problem go away. But it helped him stop some of the patterns he had. My sister's go-to thing was her glasses. And when she went to bed at night, she wanted to take them off. She didn't see at all with them very well. She would put them on the dresser next to her bed. She knew when she woke up in the morning, we always had a certain place where they were going to be, so she wouldn't panic, and she'd reach over and she'd find them. And one of the caregivers one day put it inside the drawer at the place where she was living, and she woke up and it wasn't there. It was panic. It was panic mode to her, because she was losing some safety net that we had built around her. And everybody I know is listening to this going, oh yeah, I got one of those. So who knows those routines? Who knows those routines? So how important are you in that process? Okay. So how important is it you write this down? So this is an easy task relatively. That's why I'm giving it on this overview class, because writing it down and starting a journal of some type of the things you want people to know, to say, tomorrow I'm not here. What has to be on that piece of paper? What has to be in that book? Now, we used to do it in a book. Now computers are like perfect for this, because if you want to change something, you can change it. So we have something called My Special Life Online. You can use it. It's on our website in our planning process. It's all the categories that you could possibly think of. You can download pictures. You can then keep it and give the username and password to somebody who is going to be the guardian. It just reminds you that you need to do it. Have your child involved if they're able to do it, right? Have them pick the pictures you want to download. But it's a easy, could be a fun task. Maybe you pick every Friday you're going to download another page. Maybe it's going, and then when you get done, if you want to print out parts of it, you can use it for certain people, however you choose to use it. But however you choose to use it, share it. Share it with the people who are going to have to know that information, right? So that's all I wanted to cover that as initial training. So you kind of knew it wasn't too heavy today, that we were going to cover the planning process that we're going to cover the rest of this week. So I'll go through the classes again. Today we just did an overview. If you want to watch it again, it'll be there. Second class will be government benefits, that SSI, SSDI, Medicaid, Medicare. We'll be talking about those benefits. What are the things you have to know to apply? When do you apply? When will they change? How do they change? That'll be the benefits class. The next class will be legal. So talking about your wills, your trust, what do you need? What does your child need? What kind of special needs trust? Which trust? When do you need which trust? And guardianship, and how do you think about guardianship? So that'll be the legal class. That's number 3. The 4th class will be the ABLE Act. Okay, so we're going to talk about the ABLE. What is it? What are the rules? How do you use it? How it might change? How it has changed? How do you determine what money can go in it? And how do you determine what money can come out? How do you have to track it? Okay, how can you goof it up? And how will you use it practically? So that'll be the ABLE class. And then the 5th class is you and retiring. And how do you build your plan? Because when you retire, when you take Social Security, it's going to impact your child. I was talking to somebody today and they called about how does just a couple determine when to take their Social Security? They were still working. One was 69, one was 60. She was like 64. And when are they going to take their benefits? And then we put their child into it, and they both thought they're going to wait till 70. And I said, well, if you wait till 70, and they were working specifically till 70, so one of their children could stay on their health insurance and they didn't even know that their child with special needs could be on their health insurance. So we put that all into place. And how do we put that in place on the planning process? And then finally, how do we plan our planning around that? All right. So very, very important things we have to be thinking about. That's class number 5. And then the fun day will be Saturday. It's August 7th. It's 11:15. I think it's Central Time. Check the schedule. But it'll be a live class. I'm going to stay on as long as you need me to answer questions. I've committed to like an hour and a half, but if you're a lot of questions. So if you can attend each class, I suggest that you do that. I think it's going to be out there every day to watch as much as you can, and then spend Saturday with me answering questions. It'll be very fun. It'll be live. Okay. Sorry, these are not live, but I thought this way everybody can watch them. Now, my last point today is a guilt card. What the heck is a guilt card? I grew up in a world of feeling guilty if I didn't get something done. It was taught, if you don't do this, something bad will happen. So I just use it as a fun thing. But I would like you to think about this. I would like you to think about what do you have to do? What is the first thing? Don't write 10 things. What did you hear today that you haven't done yet that you're going to focus on in the rest of the classes? And when you get done with this conference this week and you have questions about it, write them down on the guilt card too. Okay. But I would like you to commit to the first thing you promised me to do. And if you're listening to this, I would love it if you would email me your name and tell me what you're committing to. Okay. I know that if I commit to my trainer that I'm going to, I have a rower, I will row 10 days, 10 days in a row for 30 minutes. I do it because somebody's going to ask me if I did it, right? I'm asking you to do this. What are the things you heard today that you need to do? And what's your number 1? What is the one you say, I'm going to start writing about my child and I promise to do it every Friday. I'm going to do it on their birthday every year. I'm going to update it. I'm going to attend the next classes. I don't care what it is. All right. And here's our email, info@protectedtomorrows.com. It will be directed to me. And if you give me what you're promising you're going to do, that would be tremendous. Then I will be able to hold you accountable for some of that. Okay. So I hope it's to attend the next sessions and see me on the Q&A. It'll be fun. And I look forward to it. So I hope this gave you a good overview of what we're going to cover this week. And we'll see you Saturday. And if you have questions in the meantime, you got my info@protectedtomorrows. If you have a question or there's something very specific you are listening to and you say, wow, I want to remember to ask this on Saturday, go ahead and email. So I will know. I'll be prepared with your question. Okay. All right. That's what I have for today. And I thank you for participating. I look forward to seeing you at our live session. And I'll see you next day on benefits. Take care. Night.